Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Alfred Hitchcock film series of the Castle Dracula podcast. Now, on our podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and lately, a lot of Alfred Hitchcock around. And this week, we return to our multi-part retrospective on the scariest films from the master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, and tonight's movie is Vertigo, starring Jimmy Stewart and Kim Novak. Now, bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of Alex Van Helsing, Triumph of Death, which comes out like this month, if you're actually listening to this in July of 2012. So at the end of the month, in August, there's a brand new hardback, Alex Van Helsing, so you must look for it at Amazon or your local store. With me are Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at halloweenman.com. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy.
Howdy. Tony Salvaggio, creator of Psychom Book 3, which is coming out this August, and I am a co-creator with Tony on this, and I'm so excited because people are finally going to get Book 3 of the manga Psychom, and I'm very excited about that. Say hello, Tony.
Hey.
And color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello, Julia.
Heidi-ho, neighbor.
Heidi-ho. Okay, Vertigo. Now, to paraphrase Wikipedia, Vertigo is a 1958 psychological... Can you guys still hear me? It sounded like I cut out for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. I apologize. To the audience, I apologize. I lost my mic for a second. Vertigo is a 1958 psychological thriller directed by Alfred Hitchcock and starring James Stewart, Kim Novak, and Barbara Bell Geddes, you may know from Dallas. And the screenplay was written by Alec Koppel and Samuel A. Taylor, based on the 1954 novel Among the Dead. It is the story of a retired police detective suffering from acrophobia, fear of heights, who is hired as a private eye to follow the wife of an acquaintance to uncover the mystery of her peculiar behavior. And what leads from there, of course, and I'm not going to go into a long synopsis because there's no way you would listen to this if you've never seen Vertigo. But this movie has many twists and turns. It starts out, please follow my wife because she's acting weird and she's obsessed with a dead relative, and then it becomes increasingly strange. So, and we'll go through the sections of it. So, first impressions of Vertigo, jumping right into it. Drew, what do you want to tell us about Vertigo?
I'm not going to say that, like, for the times I had previously seen this movie, and I think this is probably the fourth time I've actually sat down and watched it, I enjoyed it more. Somehow this time around, maybe it's because previously we had watched Psycho and The Birds, which are two of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock movies, but for something about it this time around just was kind of off for me. Like I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I had the previous time. I still very well acted and still very well shot, but it's like the first part of the movie. This movie is really two halves. Like the first part of the movie is sort of again very well shot and very well acted, but sort of a conventional, almost supernatural thriller. And then you have the second part where it turns into this sort of kinky, almost proto-erotic thriller, like what we had in like the late 80s, early 90s, like those kind of movies.
You're talking about Sliver
out.
And Basic Instinct and stuff.
Yeah, and like all those movies that are about obsession. And
yes.
That's the interesting part. You know, as much as I love supernatural horror, that is the interesting part of the movie to me. It's like really when it gets into this weird thing that's dealing with Jimmy Stewart's obsession with this woman, that's when the movie actually picks up and becomes interesting to me. And unfortunately, that is also the shorter part of the film. So it sort of ends abruptly, almost ends in a way, as I said earlier, reminds me of a Universal horror film where it's like, oh, monster's dead, movie's over. And,
and just to recap for I feel like we probably should explain for the audience, I just sort of vaguely alluded to this, but he starts out investigating this guy's wife, and he says, my wife's acting really strange, and she's obsessed with this dead relative, and it really does look for the longest time, spoiler, all spoilers, it looks for the longest time like maybe she's possessed by this ghost. And you really believe that that's where this movie is going. And then where the movie twists is when you find out that it's actually an elaborate con, and he's become obsessed with one of the con artists. And all right, so didn't work for you. It left you a little cold this time. Tony, first impressions, Vertigo.
I hadn't seen it in a while, and I actually dug it. And I still, though, I always think I've seen High Anxiety more times than I've seen Vertigo. And so I'm always going back to that. Which
you'll have to refresh us on High Anxiety
times, because that would be a nice capper to our 3 Hitchcock film retrospective. If you didn't go out and watch High Anxiety, I thought it was really cool. It gets a lot creepier than I remembered. I mean, Jimmy Stewart starts to just be a creep.
Yeah,
kind of strange to see that. But yeah, I still dig it. It didn't fall as flat for me this time as it did for Drew. I thought it was pretty awesome. Luckily, since I hadn't seen it in a while, I'd kind of forgotten a lot of the bits and kind of that happens. So
I had forgotten essentially everything. Julia, first impressions, Vertigo.
Well, I have to agree with Drew that it's given that it's kind of widely known as one of Alfred Hitchcock's masterpieces, and everybody kind of thinks of it that way. And what I think of is the scene where he's on the stairs, and it kind of does that zoom in, track out, or whatever however you say that shot, which apparently is called, and some people call it a trombone shot. So that was kind of cool. Zoom out, track in is what it is.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that is such a neat effect, and so I always think of that when I think of that film. Like I was thinking, that Vertigo's that movie with that shot, and that's
Can
really.
Can you explain to us again what that?
He's up high on the stairs going because he had when they start the movie, he has this incident where he almost falls off a roof, and another police officer dies trying to help him. So after that, he has this terrible fear of heights, like you said. And so at one point, he's going up this bell tower, which, by the way, doesn't actually exist on the real mission. They just added it on photographically, cinematographically, I guess. Anyway, so he's going up there, and he looks down into it's like not a spiral staircase, but it's one of those like kind of a square of staircases that just go down and go down and go down. So you can go look down, and all of a sudden, it just starts to look like the whole thing kind of pulls up and goes back out again. And they said it was a contra zoom. It's just zoom out and track in shot that this cameraman invented, an uncredited cameraman, by the way.
I think it's the opposite. I think it's
for this movie. Huh?
I think it's the opposite. I think it's zoom in and track out.
Well, no, what it says here in this IMDb thing is zoom out and track in, sometimes called contra zoom or trombone shot. But anyway, I don't know how to.
And we also see that in Jaws, right? Where the when the kid gets bit in half by the shark, and Roy Scheider is just hanging out on the beach, huh?
Well, it's used in a few times after that, but this is apparently where it's originated.
Yeah.
So, but other than that,
but I'll always remember that, because basically what'll happen is you keep one thing, whatever it is, in sharp focus, and the camera just sort of runs the heck away from that focal point. So, whether it's just being walked back or it's being whipped back on a track. And so that means, by the way, that you have to keep focusing on this focal point even as the camera is moving. It's a complicated physical thing to do. And it's neat. It's interesting to me that was invented for this movie. Yeah.
But other than that, and maybe the opening credits, I'm not really sure that this film is as memorable. We watched it a couple of weeks ago, and I already was forgetting all about it. So I feel like the story is just so weird. I mean, it's so the relationships are so dysfunctional, and it's really, he really is just an obsessive, strange character, and the women are very weak and needy. And so I don't know. I don't think I love it. And the thing is, if it was a character study of those kind of relationships, that would be one thing. But it almost seems to glorify it. It doesn't seem to think that there's anything wrong with that per se. Like
well,
there's no big learning at the end. Anyway, so that's what I'm just saying. That's my first impression is that as a film, I kind of leave with the bad taste in my mouth about the plot and the characters. But of course, the cinematography and all that is phenomenal. So all the
Kim Novak is the girl, and we should probably discuss. And after looking at James Stewart, I think we should look at Kim Novak and what makes her sexy.
Well, James Stewart's over twice her age, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, and which just contributes to the creepiness here.
Mm-hmm.
So my first impressions were, first of all, I saw this movie back in college in some like student union kind of thing, and I remembered nothing of it. Actually, I remember two things. I remember Barbara Bell Geddes was in it, and I remember that she was looking young and sort of cute in a kind of a bizarre 1950s 30-something Bobby Soxer kind of way. I mean, she's cool. She's a neat character, and she's kind of a beatnik actually. I mean, she's a neat character. And then I remember the girl jumping out the window, but none of the rest of it stuck with me. None. So this time, I actually was really interested in the detective story that takes the first half of the story of the thing, and then the degeneration of James Stewart's character. So for me, it worked, but it is so weird and so dreamy. I think that might have something to do with the fact that a couple of weeks later, I have a hard time picking this movie apart. I mean, it begins to just like, it's like just strands in the fingers of my brain, and I have a hard time remembering, what came first and what came later. That may very well be part of the design of the movie, although that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense that you would make a movie that would deliberately be hard to remember. But it
is very dreamlike. I mean, you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. I mean, look what happens when Kim Novak, when he towards the end, and we're skipping to that, and I think maybe we should get to it later. But when Kim Novak becomes Kim Novak again, when she's literally in a film of blue. Madeline. Yeah. When she becomes Madeline, when we see her as Madeline, and then we see her as Judy, and then he basically twists her arm until she will transform into Madeline for him, and because that is obviously his sexual need is for her to transform into this thing, and his obsessive need is his psychosexual need, I guess. And when she shows up, she's literally in a big blue cloud. I mean, it's so weird. It's dreamlike. So let's get right into Jimmy Stewart's character, who occupies the whole movie and who we first meet as a police detective chasing a bad guy across the rooftops. And at first he does not seem to be that terrible a guy. He seems kind of interesting. He's suffering from from stress. I don't remember. Do they make mention of his agoraphobia right out front? His acrophobia. Because we open with a scene where he's chasing the guy on the rooftop, and he falls. He slips, he falls, he grabs a rain gutter, he is dangling, he's scared by the fact that he's looking down. Another cop comes and tries to give him a hand, and that cop falls to his death.
And then the next shot is him in Midge's studio talking to her about how he had never realized that he had this fear of heights until he was there.
That's right. Okay, that is where we mention it. So right up front, right away. Now, first of all, something really weird here, and that is that we just saw him dangling from the rain gutter. Cop wasn't able to grab him, and so now we cut to Midge's place, where Midge is his ex-fiancée, and they're talking, and it's apparently been months and months and months, and Jimmy Stewart has been wearing a back brace, and so we didn't even get to see him get rescued. Did anybody catch that? Because I did not catch it until somebody pointed it out to me. Were you weirded out by the fact that we didn't see the rescue?
No, I mean...
No, it didn't bother me.
It's not really important that you see him. I mean, obviously, he strained his back and he's been recuperating. I didn't, you know, it didn't really matter to me that people came and rescued him. You know,
no, I mean, it's a good point. But, Drew, you were thinking something else. Or is that what you were about to say?
I kind of wish more modern. I wish modern movies kind of did more things like that instead of just having the. I kind of liked that it didn't spell it all out for me, and that certain things are explained by dialogue or through Jimmy Stewart's, little demonstration of how his phobia works. Like most, like I think if this was a more contemporary movie, you would have some big long speech with it'd be almost like the end of Psycho, where you have a psychiatrist sort of barking at you what's wrong with Jimmy Stewart, and I like that they chose this approach personally.
And boy, that scene with Midge has so much. Have you ever seen this much exposition in one scene before? I mean, and not like long-winded exposition like the end of Psycho, but just quick, efficient exposition. Look how much we learn in this one scene where Midge is in her groovy studio apartment. We learn that he's in a back brace that's about to come off. We learn that he's leaving the police force. We learn he's afraid of heights. He demonstrates it for us by stepping up on something. We learn that Midge and he used to be engaged, but they're not anymore, but they're still friends. We learn that Midge paints brassieres and has a commercial art business. What's that?
I just think it's funny that you make it sound like she does this often. I think this is the one time that she painted a brassiere.
Well, yeah, but I mean, she does commercial art. She's a working artist, so she has basically the perfect romantic comedy job. By the way, she has a cute media role in a groovy apartment. In this case, in San Francisco. And
that's the thing. I mean, it's kind of weird to me. You hit the nail on the head saying that it's like a comedy. That those scenes in her studio with her feel like some kind of Doris Day movie, with that's supposed to be like a cute little romantic comedy, and they'll end up together and in love. And after once he realizes what he truly has with her, because she even says that he's like the only man she's ever loved, even though it's been since college that they were together. And then the rest of the movie just doesn't fit with that. So it's kind of a weird.
Well, I feel really bad for her because she's the closest thing to a semi-functional human being out of the main characters. She's not a murderer. She's not obsessed. She's not a con artist. She's sweet, and as Julia points out, if she was Doris Day, she'd be set.
Yes. She has a regular job.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And if it were a romantic comedy, that these two crazy kids are going to wind up together after he, for some reason, chases the femme fatale who will meet him. Now but because the movie is so, in the end, unrelentingly dark, it'll drag Midge down as well. But there's still opportunities. But I just wanted to mention something here. That and at the end of how good an exposition scene this is, by the end of that scene where they learned all that stuff that I just listed, then he says, and by the way, since I'm going to be a private eye now going to go see my old friend from the war who disappeared for a while, but he's back, and he wants to hire me for a job, and he lives out and he works out on the in the docks. And all that. I mean, basically, we just got what most movies would spend like 4 scenes and half an hour doing. They just gave us in like a few lines of dialogue, which you either dig or you don't. I mean, that you either kind of go, well, that's a little false that two people would speak so much useful information for us.
But it's not obnoxious. It's not obnoxious because the dialogue is good, and the actors are good.
Yeah. Now, Danny Peary, I have to point this out. Danny Peary wrote in Cult Movies a book that I describe as Pink Blue, to Joya's consternation. I was earlier looking, because whenever I need to look up a cult movie, I look in the book called Cult Movies by Danny Peary.
Can you hand me that Pink Blue book? And I said, you mean lavender? And he's like, I'm a man. My people call it Pink Blue.
Oh, dear. Okay.
My brain, I was so tired, my brain was literally shorting out. So I was like, hand me that pink blue book. But,
nice.
but anyway, cult movies, if you have not read this book, you totally have to get it. It has really wonderful essays on a million different groovy cult books. And it's out of print, but, you can always find a copy at Amazon or whatever. Anyway, he spends some time on Vertigo, and he has a cockamamie idea that basically all of this is an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. That basically everything you see post Rain Gutter is a fantasy. I think I don't know what to do with that. I think that's probably nuts, but it is compelling. It's interesting, and it's possible. when he says, because if you interpret all of this as a fever dream of Scottie, then it explains a great deal. It explains how we don't see him get rescued. It explains,
or they didn't decide to show that.
Right, or it would have been expensive to show a big rescue.
Magic. Like that's a weird. Like to me, that's a real stretch. Now, I mean, I
think that's reaching.
I can see where he comes from, but like, it's kind of, I don't know, man. That kind of comes out of the blue for me. Like,
I think Peary. I think it's just a pet theory of his. I think it's. I don't.
I mean, it's a neat like exercise, right? Like, what if this, and then you can go and try to prove that.
Yes.
Right?
It's impossible. It would be impossible, short of the director saying, "Oh yeah, actually, I don't know if anybody knew, but he's really dead the whole time."
Right.
Short of that, it is literally just a jawbone session where you're just going, "Well, you could look at the movie this way."
And if this happened, you're like, "Oh, okay." But yeah,
it's like people. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think Hitchcock would have said something to the effect of that at some point. Like, no doubt he was interviewed, and I know his daughter, Patricia Hitchcock, had been interviewed about this movie. I think if that was the deliberate intention, I really do feel like that's reaching.
I like to think about it, but I also I don't think it's the case either, and the reason why not is because I'm really too interested in. I don't think a man having a fantasy would picture everybody being as damaged as he does. I mean, the only person who comes across as even, well, I was about to say the only person who comes across as perfect is Madeline, but Madeline is deeply flawed as well because she's freaky and obsessed with death. Oh, and she's also a complete fabrication of a whole nother person. So it's literally, there are just these, Russian nested dolls out there where you go, oh, I've got to get to the bottom of Madeline's psychosis, and then you come to find Madeline doesn't even exist. But anyway, before we get to that, we're with Jimmy Stewart.
Well,
so we meet Jimmy.
She exists, but we never met her.
She exists. Well, yeah, well said. There's actually a real Madeline out there. We don't even know what she looks like. But again, we will get to that.
Apparently she looks a little bit like Kim Novak.
Like.
They say that.
Exactly the same.
Yes.
Not to fool people. No, I mean, there's a Madeline. We just never. We think we see the same person, but we don't. And
it is really unnerving.
The same person. So.
You can't. It's impossible for James Stewart to remember it that he never met her, even when he. Well, actually, no. I was confused for a second. He doesn't learn it until very much towards the end. It's difficult. Maybe I'm projecting. For me, it was difficult to remember that was not Madeline. So we should just skip over Jimmy Stewart. We'll get back to him and talk about Madeline. Jimmy Stewart, Private Eye, is put on, now out of his back brace and on the streets as Scottie, Private Eye, has been hired to look for, essentially to tail Madeline Elster, this wealthy woman who is married to this post-war industrial baron named, Elster. And Elster says, my wife's acting weird. She's obsessed with this historical personage who was part of the family, and tail her, I'm afraid she'll commit suicide. And so he starts tailing her, and, she's beautiful. She's gorgeous. She's half his age. He's in his 50s and she's somewhere in her 20s. She is tall and statuesque. She has beautiful blonde hair. She has creamy skin, and she's kind of a perfect. I'm honestly a lot more attracted to Midge, but he is way more drawn to Madeline, who is like this countess-looking thing. And
it kind of disturbed me before I knew that Madeline was not Madeline, that they carry on from the get-go, like just as soon as they even meet, they carry on like she's not married. You know what I mean? Like so.
Okay, after he saves her life. Right.
Huh?
So she. Well, how that happens is he tracks her around a little bit, goes the place she goes, follows her to the museum. He's fascinated by how sort of cool she is that she goes to the museum by herself, and she's obsessed with this painting of this dead woman who committed suicide. And then she tries to throw herself in the drink. She throws herself in San Francisco Bay, and he leaps in to save her. And after that, they begin an affair. I mean, and it's bam, right? It essentially is the next day they start this affair.
Oh yeah,
and you were disturbed by that.
He brings her to his apartment, and she's like, "Oh, I don't remember if he took her clothes off or something. I don't even remember how that works."
Oh, he took her clothes off. He changed her.
Yeah.
So
it's very much like, oh, okay, you're taking care of me now, and I guess this is how this is going to be. And there's never any mention of the husband. There's never any, I shouldn't, I'm married. There's never any, I shouldn't, you're married. You know what I mean? It's like there's not any indication that that's inappropriate for them to be having this relationship. So that was really strange to me.
Well, he's kind of a film noir gumshoe. I mean, my camera would never have a problem, sleeping with a married woman. So to some extent. But is that what we're supposed to think? Is Jimmy Stewart, at this point in the movie, are we supposed to think, oh, so Jimmy Stewart is like Mike Hammer, basically? He's gonna.
I don't think so, because he was more of a cop, like. And
I guess
none of his dealings with Midge speak anything about him being anything like that.
I'm sorry, I just spat up my coffee thinking of.
Because I don't think
Mike Hammer being friends with Midge, but.
I don't think she wouldn't really be on, into him if he was like that. It didn't seem like, just from their interaction. So, it happens, and then you're like, wow, okay.
Okay, so now we're in this illicit relationship, and so what do they do in their illicit relationship? They drive up and down the coast, and they go to art museums, and, and that is something that...
And he never checks in with the husband again, ever. Like the guy he's supposed to be spying for during that. Well, not ever. I think there is like one check-in or something. But it's never this issue of, he can't ever find out or anything like that.
No. She seems to lead a completely neglected life. And again, this strikes me as very film noir. The whole idea of the wealthy guy's wife, who the detective is supposed to be either investigating or keeping track of or whatever, and he falls for her even though she is bad news all around. And if you have this girl who doesn't seem to be overly careful about her relationships and also has a desperate need to destroy herself and talks about death all the time, I mean, you're in trouble, from the beginning, but I can see where he's kind of addicted to hanging out with her,
Sure.
I mean, she's compelling. I think she is at this point in the movie the perfect femme fatale. She is exactly the dangerous lady that will show up in any kind of movie like this. And to Drew's point, though, what else is weird, though, is that you get the real sense that there's something supernatural going on. So not only is she a femme fatale in a film noir kind of thing, but there's also this question of, is she possessed by an evil spirit that will make her hurt herself?
Well, I mean, that's how her husband frames it. He's like, look, this is going to sound crazy.
Yes.
Here's what I believe. And that's the whole premise, right? Is that, hey,
absolutely.
Follow her around. I think she's the ghost. Like.
Yes. Well, and in fact, you think about other movies where this seems to me, and I'm trying to think of a good example, but you can have a lot of film noir films where because of the genre that it is, that at the beginning everybody is going to suspect something supernatural, and then somewhere in at the 2/3 mark, we're going to learn that it's not supernatural at all. It's some regular kind of problem. And so you kind of enjoy the first-son of the supernatural, and then like Hound of the Baskervilles is exactly that. And so to some extent, in this case, Drew, you were saying you expect it to be following this supernatural gig, but to some extent, I kind of expected that it was going to go somewhere non-supernatural, that we were going to whip around to a naturalist.
Well, I never fully, I mean, not even the very first time obviously I've seen this movie a couple of times now, so I know going into it that it's a hoax, but, because Hitchcock doesn't, even when he does horror, with the exception of The Birds, he doesn't usually deal with the supernatural. He deals with it, but it usually ends up having a rational explanation in his I guess quote unquote universe.
Yeah.
So I even the first time I saw it, I was expecting it to be, there to be a turnaround, because I had seen enough Hitchcock movies to kind of know what his deal was, but it follows the pattern of a supernatural thriller. And I guess you're right. It also sort of follows the vibe of a film noir, but it's hard for me to think of it in those terms, I guess, because it doesn't look like
it
a
sure
film
doesn't.
noir.
No, in fact, it's
very
bright and colorful.
It's very colorful.
Yeah, for a dark movie, it's not dark at all. It doesn't, and it doesn't even look like that whole desert noir that we see a lot, where there's instead a lot of tans. This is a beautiful movie. In color, it could very well, it is in color, and in the way it looks, it could very well be a Doris Day movie, just like Julia says. There's every reason to think that this could take a turn where he winds up going, "You're bad news, and I'm getting together with Midge." Well,
that's what he should do. That's what he should do. I mean, I think it's clear to anybody with a brain in their head that he's put himself into a very bad position, and it's even,
Doesn't Midge take him to the hospital? No, Midge visits him in the hospital.
Yeah, she comes to
visit him in the hospital and tries to help him.
Yeah,
she nurses him back to health. She's obsessed with helping him.
Well, no, there's never any health. There's never any health that happens, but she tries.
Yeah.
He's an idiot for not falling for her, really.
Because he's obsessed. He's completely obsessed.
Well, I mean, Kim Novak is beautiful as Madeline, but honestly, like, I even she's a little frosty. Like, I even thought she was prettier as Judy.
He didn't.
Judy,
and that's not even who Alfred Hitchcock wanted. He wanted that Vera Miles to play her, and then she got pregnant.
Very sort of bird-like Vera Miles from Psycho. Yeah. Well, this is a couple of years before Psycho, but still. Yeah, so Kim Novak, the way she portrays Madeline, and we may as well assume that there is no way that Kim Novak plays the role as though Madeline does not exist. She plays the role as though Madeline is a real person who is weird. And then when Madeline supposedly kills herself finally, and Scottie has to go before the state and say, "I was afraid to go up the tower, and the woman that I was being paid to protect actually went ahead and killed herself. I'm sorry." So he, that happens. She killed herself. And so then we get Kim Novak in role 2, which is Judy the shop girl. And she wears sweaters, and she's kind of
brassy,
vaguely more middle class. Well, I mean, she's a lot more middle class, but I mean, she's less classy, than.
No, she's very Laverne and Shirley-esque kind of girl.
Yeah, she is. She's a shop girl, and that's cool, and she seems fine. And she came from, I vaguely remember that she's supposed to have come from somewhere in the Midwest, and you kind of like her. You can kind of see this being a girl that you could date and have fun with a lot more than the weird Madeline who would constantly be going, well, I like this museum, but that painting makes me want to kill myself. I mean, I worked with somebody like that. I won't even name names. Tony knows who I'm talking about. I'm like, geez. But, no, yeah, so I agree. I like Judy a lot more. But here's the weird thing. We meet Judy for like 5 minutes before we flash into Judy's head. She accepts a date. She tries to get rid of him, but she's too in love with Scottie. And we find out why she wants to go out with him, because Scottie sees her and says, oh, I want to go out with you. And the reason why she accedes to go out with him is because she already knows him, because turns out she pretended to be Madeline for all that time. Which means that whole Madeline. Yeah.
I would like to say at this point that that's the most ridiculous plan that I've ever heard that this guy has to kill his wife, because the whole idea of her pretending to be Madeline is so that the real Madeline can be killed and nobody's the wiser. And it's such an insanely complicated plan. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, why would, you know what I mean? Like, because think about all that stuff that has to happen here. He has to, I guess, hire, or is this do you think she's just his mistress, or does he hire this woman? I think he hires her.
Yeah, I don't. If there was a relationship, it wasn't a very important one.
Yeah, she's an actor and she needs the money. And so he hires her and he says, what, you're going to pretend to be my wife, but not only that, but you're going to pretend to be my wife, obsessed with somebody who died and occasionally will be possessed by this other person. So you're going to pretend to be my wife, pretending to be Carlotta.
And you're going to fake a suicide attempt. Over
a long enough period of time, right, you're going to jump in. Oh, that's part of the thing, is that she has to be good. She's a good swimmer. Jump off the bridge so that this guy can save you, and then like you're going to develop a relationship with him and see him. I guess maybe, I don't know if that's part of the plan or if it just happens. And then eventually we're gonna go to this town and we're gonna go up this bell tower in this mission, and then I'm gonna throw my wife out the window and he'll see that. And he'll think you're dead. I mean, why?
Right. And I've had this plan for years, just waiting for one of my friends with fears of heights to turn up.
Right.
And I got one, so we're good to go.
Well, I want to know how he got his wife up there without any of those nuns noticing, or
exactly.
That had to have been planned. I mean, it's a murder, murder mystery logic, and sometimes that can be preposterous.
Well, especially because these are ninja nuns who come out of the darkness, like the master. And go.
Why? Evidently, so he saw the trappings. He's a shipping magnate. He knows when his friend, aha, he's now the fear of heights. Well, this plan will go swimmingly.
Yes.
Yeah, and
so he meets Judy. I'm sorry, Tony. Go ahead.
No, well, what a jerk! I know how to get rid of my wife. It'll be these steps, and then I'll no longer have to live in the States and stay in this palatial apartment.
What's the deal again with living in the States? I don't remember the...
Well, he comes... Oh, it's her... wasn't it her father? Oh, man. Now I'm drawing.
Was the source
of... He came back for family business because the business was in the States.
Oh, okay.
And then once all her entanglement is done, he can just take the money and run.
Right.
Right. So.
Right. And I should mention here that I did watch an alternate ending for those countries that was shot and played at the very end. A stinger scene that played at the very end for countries where they had rules that if somebody commits murder, they have to be punished. So there is an ending that you got in some countries where you go to Midge's apartment and she's listening to the radio, and the radio says, and in the business of the murder of Madeleine Elster, Mr. Elster is being extradited back from France where he will undoubtedly stand trial. Oh, and then, by the way, Jimmy Stewart comes home to Midge and they drink some scotch in silence. That's so. If you really dig the happy ending where he winds up with Midge, in some countries that was literally what you got as a happy ending. so-called. I mean,
You
at
know,
the end of this, 2 hours of torture, but still.
I don't think that, I just can't wrap my brain around any ending where anybody in this particular story ends up happy. I think by the end of it, Jimmy Stewart's pretty much gone insane by the end of this film.
Yeah.
He's seen the same woman die twice.
Yes.
He's I almost don't blame him for his nutty behavior after he sees her, after the first time she's tossed off the tower.
She died the same way, by the way. She dies the same way twice.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
His behavior is strange, and so we should talk about the way he behaves towards Judy. When he meets Judy, Judy is a shop girl, and he immediately starts to date her, and it's probably, you get the impression it is very, very quickly he starts to sculpt her.
Well, it's not quick for him, though, because everywhere he looks, he sees, the other woman. Every blonde is that woman.
Yeah.
Where he goes. So there's the whole montage where he's like, hey, look
I feel like that's very telling about Hitchcock, because that is kind of what he did with his actresses. Is he would take them, he would train them and have them costumed, and he would do these photo shoots and these screen tests before he ever actually put them in a movie.
Huh.
And I think Julia was saying it almost glamorizes this kind of behavior, even though, at the same time, it does sort of acknowledge that it is a little perverse. And I think we are kind of learning a little bit about our director and his own personal hang-ups through Jimmy Stewart's behavior.
Yeah.
It's really loathsome the way that he treats. I don't find it loathsome that he is distracted by beautiful women, because, although I personally am not, that is a very common issue. And
I don't. But you're gonna have to, talk about this afterwards.
Right. Oh wait, Tony. I think your mic is giving out a little bit. So, but the way that he starts trying to sculpt her, and the way he sort of rubs her face in being attracted to these other women. I mean, they're at dinner together. He's with Judy, and he's still staring at these other girls, and it's very hurtful, and it just seems really ugly, and then it just gets uglier from there because he's picking out clothes for her, and this is where it starts to get sad, is that Judy really wants to do the things that he's asking. You can see her really trying. Go ahead.
Eventually, not at first. At first, she reacts like a sane person, and is like, it's cool if I'm not dressed exactly as her, right?
Right.
Do that instead. He's like, no, it has to be this way.
Right.
For whatever reason, she doesn't kick him to the curb, which is, I don't know, telling. I guess she really does love him, but I can't think of, any of them I know. I can't think of any of them being like, yeah, that's cool. Dress me up like the dead girl. That's nice. We'll do that.
It is really disturbing, but the thing is, it doesn't surprise me at all.
I actually disagree, I have to say.
Okay.
To a T.
I do know people who are so insanely obsessed with somebody that they will do anything. I mean, that's what, when you hear about these relationships where, a person will, they just do all kinds of perverse things to their partner, and the partner just puts up with it, or abuse, or physical abuse, or whatever.
Sure.
They just put up with it, and they even pretend that they like it in the context because they just are so obsessed with this person or so needy of this person, or whatever.
Because maybe the person's a good provider, or maybe the person is just simply filling some role in that person's life.
Or the woman feels like, or sometimes the man, but the person feels like they don't deserve better than that.
Or that this is as good as they're going to get.
Yeah, exactly.
Judy might very well believe, Scottie, the private eye here, the ex-cop, is literally the best thing that I'm ever going to have. I don't know if she really feels that way, but that's fine.
Except that she is actually a brilliant actress. If you were to look at the context of this movie, she successfully portrayed a dead woman possessed by a ghost, and
Right.
Master Sleuth here bought it hook, line, and
Yeah,
sinker.
she's from the country or something, so she doesn't. It's not like she's thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be a big star and I have the confidence to do it."
No,
it's like,
no,
oh,
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So it's very sad.
You're absolutely right.
We watch. So you're right, Drew. I mean, she is this person who has all this potential, and we get to sort of watch her be just sort of broken down by Scottie, who is a guy that we liked in the beginning, and he's just basically, we've watched him be broken down. So between the two of them, they're just crumbling. And then, and
like
Midge, of course, reaches
he's
out.
like the sugar daddy. He's like, let me take care of you, and Julia is talking about these sort of relationships that does exist, where like a woman, or even nowadays, back in that time it would always be a woman. Nowadays you have it with the genders reverse.
Yes.
Where somebody is like in a relationship where somebody's the domineering, and they're just going to sculpt their significant other into what they need them to be.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can hit the road if you don't like it.
Exactly.
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So that's awful. Now here's a question. When I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things in the plot, because we talked about Jimmy Stewart's character, we talked about Madeline's character, but there's one thing that really I'm confused by. Now, I apologize if I'm stupid for being confused, but I'm confused by this. When he tracks Madeline at the beginning, so Private Eye is tracking the person he believes to be Madeline. He follows her to a hotel. She goes up into the hotel. She goes to the window. He goes into the hotel. She goes up to the room. She hasn't been there. She's disappeared. This thread never got picked up again. What the heck was that about? Did I miss something? Did we ever learn how she pulled that off, where she went into the hotel but was never really there?
Mm-mm.
Or
No.
Okay.
No, I guess you could assume she went in as...
Oh, as Judy? Yeah, she went in as Judy.
And then
or she went in... No, we saw her go in. She went in,
she went in as
Madeline, and then she snuck out as
then the woman
Judy.
would have said, I saw her. No, but you could be right that it's something to do with the fact that she comes out as Judy. That could be part of it.
That would have been it.
Well,
She
we're
snuck out
also still in
and
supernatural. We're also still in supernatural thriller mode at that point, and we're supposed to assume that maybe he's looking at the ghost of Carlotta.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think they ever really adequately. I don't think they really adequately ever explain that away, even within the context of it being a sham.
Yeah.
That's true, but there is the whole part where the woman who runs the establishment is really coy about it. Not intentionally, but she gives all the clues of like, oh, this is where you're kind of supposed to wonder, At first,
what's going on?
It's one of the things where we think then it's the supernatural thing. Later on we go, oh, she was different people. That's probably why. I mean,
or maybe the lady from the hotel was just being paid to cover it up.
Well, that would be actually the simplest explanation for all of it.
That would be awesome, because they're really, really messing with Jimmy Stewart at that point.
Yeah.
That's true. Like, take this, Jimmy Stewart.
She should, right? Exactly. It's like that movie. It's like that movie Beat the Devil, where basically everybody in the town is in on the satanic conspiracy. Yeah, I mean, she's probably just been told to give this guy way more information than you would ever give anybody who walks into your hotel and starts asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
But tell him all of this stuff, because that makes total sense.
Heaven forbid if I ever have a friend like Jimmy Stewart. Friend with quotes. Everybody needs friends who can frame you for the murder of their wife.
Right?
Thanks for helping.
Friends like those, who needs enemies?
I would, I always hold out hope whenever I watch these things that there are just a few turns of the screw and everybody could get better. But I think you're right that Jimmy Stewart, having now seen two women he loves in theory go off the side of a building, I just don't.
Not to mention the cop at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's just. It would be tough for him to I don't know, repair himself after all of this.
He's already in weird, creepy land.
Yeah.
After after
I
the
think
first woman
he's
died.
just a lost. I think unfortunately he's just a broken man. Like you see him looking out at that the blackness sort of at the end of the movie, and I think he's an empty soul at that point. I mean,
although that could be. That could be the beginning of something else. You know, you could wind up seeing. I know this is not remotely important to Vertigo itself, but you know, any character in any movie can have backstory that can encompass an entire other movie. You know, so it's entirely possible that this could be the beginning of Scottie's life as opposed to the end of the good parts of it. You know, so
I kind of wondered if he ends up in the asylum with Norman Bates.
Right?
They kind of hang
Seriously.
out. They kind of hang out during like recess kind of times.
Yeah, and on the Alfred Hitchcock television series, we'd see him start just walking into shops all over, just going to one girl after another, going, "Here, will you put on this wig? Here, will you put on this gray suit?"
Right.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that that Drew's right, that Alfred Hitchcock is really crazy. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there.
He was notoriously both obsessed with blondes, and he was also notoriously hard on his actors. So we're learning.
But at the same time, he was like, if they would say like, "What's my motivation?" or something, he'd be like, "Oh, it's just a movie. Get over it."
Yeah.
So, you know.
But when it's a point that's important to him, he will comment. I mean, Julia and I were watching an interview with Hitchcock, and he'll go on at length about this symbolic meaning of scenes. So basically, I think some things matter to him, and some things don't matter at all. I think making actors feel comfortable about their motivation in a scene was not of interest to him, so he just blew it off.
Well, he always said that he had the entire movie shot in his head before he ever. You know, the actual shooting of the movie was the least interesting part of him. It was the prep work. And again, with Jimmy Stewart, it's the prep work. You know, he's making her into what he needs her to be, his vision of the perfect woman. And I mean, there is an element of I mean, again, it's a perverse fantasy, but an element of fantasy there, where I'm sure a lot of people have had this own idea in their head, like, I can make my perfect lover, I can make my perfect spouse, I just have to train this person. And as you know, this sort of thing does go on.
But
you
what
know,
does
maybe
this
not
need on the part of directors to explore their own hang-ups? In other words, for him to make that statement, he would have to know that he has that particular problem, you know, and I guess that's the whole point of, you know, it's just like Bob Fosse.
Certainly loved being Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, he made himself into a character that way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think Bob Fosse, when he directed All That Jazz is about a director/choreographer who is, you know, a womanizer who can't stop, and a drinker who can't stop drinking and can't stop doing drugs, and presses himself too hard and alienates all the people who love him and deserves to go to hell. And that's the character in the movie that he's making. And it's interesting, you know, that it seems like these auteur directors have this need to go ahead and kind of lay themselves out in front of the audience and go, "See, I know what you say about me, and it's all true. I'm I'm really this monster." So okay. That actually brings us around to, I'm not going to ask you guys if this was all a dream, because we talked about that at the beginning, but is there anything else that we want to bring up that I might not have talked about?
I noticed, and I guess I'd never noticed or thought about it before, is, you know, again, this is one of the things where I'm sure people have written about it, but as I was watching the bell tower scenes, all I could really think about was the '89 Batman. Like, really? Yeah, I mean,
I get it.
Similar. I'm like, you know, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it's kind of a neat thing that how, I mean, of course, the Batman bell tower was much wider, bigger, but just the way it's shot and the little bits you see, I always thought, like, hey, that's kind of cool.
I have not seen Batman '89 in probably 15 years or so. So I don't think I thought about that at all until you just now mentioned that. It's a really, really interesting thought.
I'm sure Tim Burton
Oh, sure, yeah.
is influenced by not only this movie, but probably just about every Alfred, Hitchcock movie going. So.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a really interesting thought. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I the only other really noteworthy thing is this really crazy dream sequence that he has in the middle of it, which is so, now you would never do something like this. The whole business of the kind of cutout Jimmy Stewart head surrounded by the swirling eddy and the little images, and it's all weird and green. It is so cool, but it is so it is so iconic that you could kind of never do it again. It's like it is an instant cliche, such that nobody in a million years, other than in High Anxiety by Mel Brooks, would you ever do this where you go, you know what, next? To show Bruce Wayne's going crazy, I'm going to show Christian Bale's head floating there, and it's going to be surrounded by this colorful eddy, and there's going to be Batmobiles and things flying around his head. I mean, that would be, you would never do that. But although Tim Burton might have done that if he had thought about it, but
unless it became like a cliche, that people just kept doing it over and over again.
Well, I mean, I want to say it's a cliche, but I've never actually seen it before. That's what's so weird, is that it feels like a cliche.
Thing. It's like a cartoon thing. You know how the cartoons, they always have like little stars or the birdies or whatever? Yes. It's kind of more like that.
I should have done better prep, and I apologize, but the person who did that, they get a special credit. It says special sequence by, and I should look it up and go to that, but there's it was a very...
Well, is it that same guy? Was it Saul Bass, Jason?
No, it wasn't Saul Bass, because I noticed that. I'm like, oh, well, there's Saul Bass intro, of course, but it's on the tip of my tongue, and now I should have written it down as a talking point, and I can't.
But you're saying that whole animated sequence, was certainly somebody's art when it's done.
Right.
So
well, I mean, it was definitely planned. Got his own credit, special sequence.
By the way, do you know this is one of the 5 movies that was unavailable for 30 years?
That's hard for me to imagine. I mean, it's so it came back.
He just took it off the whatever, I guess not the market, but out of availability, whatever that is in movie terms, and then because he wanted it to be a legacy for his daughter.
So it came back in what, the 80s or the 90s? When did?
Yeah, it was the 80s.
So I should mention that we watched it on a DVD that we borrowed from the library, and the one that we had gotten was restored, which probably, and the last time I saw it, which was in the early 90s, it was the pre-restored version. And one thing that we know in this new version that we see is that a lot of the sound effects have been replaced, which I find fascinating. I think it's really bizarre that restoration of film can include the creation of original sound effects, original, glass breaking and footsteps and things like that. Did you guys know that? I mean, I had no idea until I actually watched, I watched one of the documentaries.
I think that's probably the only version I've ever seen.
It's what? I'm sorry?
The restored version. I would imagine that's probably the only version I've ever seen.
Yeah. The what do you think though about this question of of filming new elements or recording new elements and putting them in?
I think it depends on how intrusive it is. I hate it when, say, when they went into the old Star Wars movies and added in newer special effects. That bugs the hell out of me because it looks intrusive. It doesn't match.
Because it's so visible.
With this, it doesn't. Sound effects. It all matches. It doesn't. Everything feels like it's of the period that the movie was filmed in.
There's also
where
right,
yeah.
I mean, I can't remember any changes. I mean, because this is not a film I watch and analyze a lot. But I don't like it. The effects changes that we talked about it on Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah,
those are crummy. I mean, and it's a shame, too, because we live in an age where you can digitally branch that and go, hey, we did this new thing. Isn't this cool? But
wait,
you don't like that.
changes in Return of the Living Dead? I don't think we even talked about that, Tony.
They changed some of the soundtrack around in Return of the Living Dead.
They changed the voice of the Sid Moore Cops guy. They changed the voice of the tar zombie.
No
kidding.
kidding.
About it when we did that movie.
Yes,
and
of course,
you
of course.
Can't get, other than VHS, you can't get an original. They didn't branch it. They haven't, even the Blu-ray. There doesn't exist a movie. VHS, like, that doesn't exist.
When it's done right, it looks good, and you still feel like it's honoring what the original filmmakers would have wanted. Like they're preserving.
Which is what art
something,
restoration is supposed to do. I mean, when they restored the Sistine Chapel, it was intended to try to reproduce the original colors and get rid of some of the sun damage and smoke damage and stuff.
But when it's done badly, it's adding color to the black and white King Kong.
Right. Or, for that matter,
you don't have to not have the original, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are so many ways to do that digitally. That's what bugs me. Is you can have an extra disc, you can branch it, you can have alternate soundtracks. Like, back in the day, you got a VHS and you got one version. It was widescreen or pan and scan, or you got, the newly restored one that didn't have this, or if it was anime, you got it subtitled or not, and it was more if you got it subtitled because they didn't sell as many copies. But now there's just no reason. Like the new Blade Runner coming out is 3 versions on one single Blu-ray that's branched.
Oh, sweet.
Like, there's no reason.
Well, they did a version of the Bela Lugosi Dracula a few years back that has a soundtrack by Kronos music. Quartet.
You don't like it?
Yeah. I think the music itself is neat, but
but it's an experiment. It actually. So I'm curious about this, Tony. And by the way, so much here. So I enjoyed the Kronos Quartet, of course. Like you're pointing out, Drew, Dracula never had a soundtrack. So in the end, it's just kind of no person will be fooled and think, when people saw this in the 30s, it had this groovy Philip Glass soundtrack. I mean, it doesn't even sound like it could possibly have been recorded then. But and there was that Metropolis in the 80s that Tony and I are fans of that has all rock. It's all like Adamant and Bonnie Tyler and stuff like that.
That was on Netflix, by the way. Instant. That Marauder version's on Netflix Instant.
I really recommend that. And for years that was gone because nobody. I mean, for the longest time, nobody could get the rights to put out the Marauder version of Metropolis, and I guess now it's cheap enough to get a collection involving Adamant and Bonnie Tyler too.
Well, it was cool. I got to see it at Banamathon on the
team,
and that was super awesome.
But what do you guys think about? And I think we lost Julia because she's been awfully silent. Oh, okay. But okay, and Julia, feel free to answer this as well. But I don't completely understand, Tony, the argument you were making. Are you saying that?
I'm saying that if you're going to restore something, like hopefully it's within reason, it's not obtrusive. But if you are going to change it, why not put the original on a disc, on a DVD, on a branching sequence, whatever?
Right.
Yeah.
For archival purposes, right? So that you can feel like, hey, that's cool. Let's there's this is how it originally was seen.
Well,
right.
And also just to show how great the restoration is, to show like, hey, look what we can do.
Yeah. And look at how this had faded. Look how the only versions we had were like this. And in fact, that's the case. I think on the new Blu-ray, the newest Blu-ray of Vertigo, you do in fact have a theatrical version, or at least the most recent theatrical version that they had, which would have been the 80s re-release, which still had the old soundtracks and stuff. When they did this reproduction, this restoration, they drew from a number of different sources, taking a sequence here and a sequence there to sort of build the best single gold source of Vertigo that they could put together, and then they put the music on top of it, and it just so happened that they therefore had to re-record a lot of the sound effects because they'd stripped away all the music, and I guess the music and the sound effects were on the same.
I don't have any doubt that the guys that did this for Vertigo were very respectful and trying to be as inintrusive as possible. But it's hard for me to compare because, again, I don't think I've ever seen the theatrical version. I think that this DVD version is the only version I've ever seen.
I don't think you'd ever notice the difference. Me personally, the impression I get is that you would have to be some kind of Rain Man to be aware at all of any of the differences here. Unlike with Star Wars, where they're making changes and yeah, and they're annoying and they're deliberately provocative, and everybody can argue, and maybe that's the point. Maybe that particular auteur.
I have stuff about my comic book that I look at what I did when I was because I've been doing my comic book for over, a decade, a little over a decade now. And
Great topic. All right, yes, Drew. Yeah.
I see
your
things in the old Halloween Man stuff that there's writing stuff that isn't as good. There's editing stuff that isn't as good. Certainly, there's stuff that I even outright ignore and or make fun of in subsequent things that I wish I could, if I could travel back in time, I could change. But it's there, and when I reprint the stuff, I don't change it, except for maybe as little as possible, because I think, okay, that is the creative person I was at that time, and I want to show people the progression of me as an artist and as a writer. And
that's really interesting.
That is more useful to me to show, okay, young, aspiring comic book creators, here's what you can go from to this. I don't think it's useful, and I think this applies to any medium of art. I think that's true of film, music, whatever. I do think there's a certain warts and all has its purpose, and not every piece of art is flawless. In fact, most of it isn't, and I often say that perfection is the enemy of good in art. And
that's interesting.
I don't know, I feel like what Lucas does is wrong and very anti, it's...
I think there's a difference, though. It flies in the face. Lucas is, well, it's possible that this is all relative, right? But I know for a fact that if I decided to take some kind of clean source of the copy of my first book, which I wrote a long, long, long time ago, and was published, but I have the rights back. It was a long time ago I got the rights back. I could publish the first Macduff book on my own if I wanted to. I don't know why I would exactly, but if I do that, though, I'm going to rewrite it. I mean, I'm not going to release the original version. There's no way. I was 22 years old. I didn't know what I was doing. And I would not have any compunction at all to pull the trigger on that.
It's not that you didn't know what you were doing. It's that you think that you would like to go back in time and redo it again and do it again, and you could if you're republishing it. Because the thing is, it's not. So you just disagree with Drew that there's value to showing the growth as an artist, because you're I'd rather just have a really good.
It's hard to say, and the thing is, the difference is, though, that book, The Iron Thane, is not famous, so nobody's going to say that I ruined their childhood.
No, but it has nothing to do with being famous or not. It has to do with being basically you're saying I would create a new work based on the original.
I suppose.
As opposed to reprinting the original.
That's a little different, though. That's almost like doing a. I did do a revamped version of one of my own stories, but I will cop to the fact that it is not. That is in fact not the same story. It's definitely not the same comic book. It has it's a retelling, which even within.
Which one was that?
Alfred Hitch. I redid the origin story. I did a different version of it. There's two different versions. And I like the second one better. I have no problem admitting that. No, nothing against anybody involved with the first one. I just and I learned a few things in my many years as a comic book professional. But even Alfred Hitchcock remade his own movies. There's 2 versions of The Man Who Knew Too Much.
And I think there's 2 versions of The Hitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
good
think
point.
there's
And
anything
Michael
wrong
Mann
with that.
Yeah, I was going to say Michael Mann made 2 versions of Heat, by the way, because he shot it once as L.A. Takedown, and then.
So those are 2 different things. Then there's edits, and then there's revamps or reworkings or whatever.
Well,
actually,
I
am going to reprint. I am going to in defense of what I was saying previously. I am planning on taking that old Halloween Man comic book that I wrote when I was 18.
Yeah.
And I'm going to reprint it, with very little alterations, with the exception of, trying to sharpen up the images for printing. Like it's going to be.
I would be interested in that. I would like to see that because I think it would look really cool to have a book that had one and then the original in the back. I think that would be really neat, and that's something that I would buy.
That sounds like a plug for a future thing.
Yes, right. It's an endorsement of a future project.
An endorsement, endorsement's my mistake.
And in fact, we should do that because we've been on for a long time. We should totally wrap. And I want to get your final thoughts, and let's do that, and then let's do endorsements. So, getting back to Vertigo, final thoughts, up and down, really quick, so then we can get to your endorsements. Drew, Vertigo, what do we know? Do people who haven't seen it want to go see it? You
should see it. But I will say I enjoyed talking about it more than I actually enjoyed watching it. Just go around.
All right, Tony, final thoughts.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's interesting seeing, seeing super creep Jimmy Stewart, and I think it works. Like it's really cool. Made me again want to go back and watch High Anxiety. Want to go back and watch Tim Burton's Batman, and also, it's just. It's Hitchcock. It's like I said before, it's shot so well, and there's so many. Every film you can write a book on. Just analyzing how it's put together.
Yes.
And, I really.
Especially this one, which has so much going on in it. Yeah.
Yeah, but everything we've. I always feel kind of remiss when we get through with the Hitchcock film because I feel like I didn't get scholarly enough, or like. There's so much that can be said.
Yeah, it's just the beginning.
We could do several podcasts just on each movie. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we did this series. So.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll have to revisit Alfred Hitchcock at some point because he has so many movies.
I think so. I think we'll definitely. I want to get back to. I think we're going to go and do some other stuff, but I want to get back to like Marnie and. I know there's probably
Rear Window.
I think the Hitcher. Yeah, sir, not the Hitcher. I'm sorry, the Hitcher by
the
Hitchcock.
Lodger.
No, but
you're thinking of The Lodger, right?
The Lodger, yes, and he filmed The Lodger twice. Yeah, that was the one that he did twice. So, okay, which is Hitchcock's Jack the Ripper, in fact. Julia, final thoughts on Vertigo.
Well, pretty much what I've said, that it's just another drop in the bucket of things that make me realize how crazy Alfred Hitchcock really was. And just, more dysfunctional. And then I find that I don't know if I have to, go back and examine my own perspective on things, because I find that I'm seeing every movie that we do as, some example of how dysfunctional people are, but I don't know if that's because that horror movies, that's the whole point, is they're supposed to be exploring the darker sides of people, maybe. So I'm gonna say it's not me so much as it is the movies. Mm-hmm. But I'm just I keep seeing that recurring theme of people being in these weird relationships. Anyway, but so it's an interesting.
I assure you, it's not you.
Yeah, it's an interesting film, but it's definitely not my favorite of the Hitchcocks that I have seen or that we have reviewed.
All right. So my final thought, there's nothing I could really add to all of that other than, this one has one of the best scores. I think if you watch this, you'll see a lot of, if you haven't seen it before, Vertigo is really a great movie to settle in with on a Saturday, Saturday afternoon or a Saturday evening that's a little more highbrow than some of the stuff that we watch. You certainly can never go wrong familiarizing yourself with Hitchcock and seeing some of these motifs that will get used again and again in other movies. So I really appreciate it as a reasonably enjoyable kind of part of your film education. I think it's a little cold, and it's hard to get engaged with any of these characters because some of them are pathetic and some of them are cruel, and everybody who starts out, sort of going along a righteous path always winds up sort of tripping off, and so that's hard to watch. But the fact that it's hard to watch kind of makes it an interesting movie. Okay, endorsements. If anyone has anything to endorse, and you are welcome to do log rolling for your own stuff. Drew, anything to endorse?
I have two things to endorse. One, yes, I have a slew of Halloween Man graphic novels available on Indie Planet, and they are soon to be available on Indie Planet digital for those of you who like Kindle and your iPhone, smartphone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you can go to indieplanet.com, look up Halloween Man. You will find 4 graphic novels, soon to be 5. Please order those. My second endorsement, a non-personal endorsement, it's been a bomb at the box office, but please, 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 everybody go see Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Okay? I know everybody is saying they are tired of seeing vampire movies where the vampires sparkle and are all whiny and aren't monsters. Well, shame on you for not going and seeing this movie. Why do you hate America? Because our president righteously destroy the undead in a way that would make Peter Cushing proud.
Awesome.
I totally agree.
Is it Tim Burton? Did Tim Burton direct that movie, or is that?
He was the producer.
Ah, okay. All right, I see. All right. All right. And Tony, any endorsements?
Well, I noticed this past week there's a pretty awesome Hitchcock Blu-ray box set that's coming out. And I actually put the link on our podcast page on Facebook. As far as new stuff for us, we have SciComm 3 coming out next month.
Yes.
And that's been really cool. We've in both print on demand and digital, and it's looking really good. And you're
finally going to be able to read SciComm on the Kindle, which I'm excited about.
And there's still copies. They'll be digital, and regular copies are still available of the first 2. So if you haven't, before it was a really hard sell where you'd be like, hey, you should pick up the first 2. Maybe one day you can read the third one. And that's really hard to do. I know I would not.
Yeah, this is the first time that book 3 will be in print. Book 3, I was at a school visit, Tony, down in the valley, and I went to this school where all these kids, I sent pictures, and all of these middle schoolers were obsessed with SciComm, and they demanded to know why Volume 3 was not out. So,
I think that had something to do with, at least partially, why we're in the short queue of Tokyo Pop books to come out. So, and then we'll be hitting that up. I'm sure this won't be the first time people will hear about SciComm, but and actually, going back, sorry to lengthen this, but there is one thing when Drew was talking about changing your books or revamping.
Yeah. There's
one part of SciComm. I totally agree. I meant to talk about it, but I just wish there's only one thing in SciComm that bugs me, and I wish that I could change it.
Interesting.
It still bugs me this day because it's a thing that happens and we never use it again, and I just go, why didn't I make that something else? But
interesting. I really am dying to know what you're talking about, but you don't have to.
No.
You don't have to tell me.
Well, we could talk about it some other time.
Right. But, sometime when we're not on the air. Yeah. That's fine.
And
okay.
Yes, and I think that's it. Also, not to plug it too hard, but if you are in Austin and are a drummer, and you're listening to this podcast, Desert to Mars needs a drummer. So
You're looking for
really,
a drummer?
Yeah.
I could probably help you.
Yes, we definitely are. It's completely amicable. Our drummer Billy is really busy. In fact, so busy he was at Comic-Con, and he was making games for Kevin Smith, and that's what he's been working on. It's Smarcade, part of the Smodcast that he does, and it's like Jay and Silent Bob games, which are awesome. And I had to be kind of jealous because he got to go to Comic-Con, and I didn't have a good way to justify going to Comic-Con this year.
I did not want to go to Comic-Con. You could justify it. You've got 2 books. Well, no, you got Cyclone 3
I need
coming out, but
it was pretty awesome because he was demoing it with Kevin Smith, and they were playing the games, this whole thing. So, on the one hand, and he's got a daughter, and so on the one hand, we're super good friends, and I, love that he, wanting to be a drummer. On the other hand, it's like crazy good things going on. So we're still writing for the second album, but we are looking for a drummer. So because Billy's doing awesome stuff. So.
I think you totally could have gone to Comic-Con if you'd wanted to, but honestly, Tony, you've been before. I just have no. I'm not the guy for Comic-Con myself. I just have no desire to go.
I think next year, but I don't go to panels and stuff. I go there to talk to people, and
I like panels. I do. I enjoy panels.
I don't go to any of them. Like I go there to meet people and to talk about my book and see other people's books is a big thing. Like, oh man, I didn't know you were working on that. So that's why I go. It's kind of a.
But I get so overwhelmed by just the noise and the just the lines and how many people and it just it depresses me.
I don't know.
I think being exposed to humanity gets me down. I can't explain it, but
I can understand. I think it's a difference like when we were in Tokyo, and I was like, "Oh, Tokyo's cool," and Rain's like, "This is way too much."
Right.
I think I'm okay.
That is it. When you see every toy that you've ever envisioned in your entire life all in one room, suddenly you're like, I don't want to look at any of this because there's too much good. I know this sounds crazy, but it's like there's too much good stuff here. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go away and I want to come back and I want there to be like one shelf of good stuff because otherwise it's like the Vatican Museum. I don't know how to take it all in.
Ooh. I remember what I missed and then I'll shut up. But
yeah.
Alfred Hitchcock Presents is actually on Netflix Instant now. So.
Oh, yeah. Sweet.
So that's pretty rad. So you can continue. This is our last one for a while on Hitchcock, but you can continue the Hitchcock awesomeness on Netflix Instant. So.
Very cool. That's a wonderful idea, and that's the second. Cool. I think our biggest meta endorsement is Netflix Instant. Julia, endorsements?
Well, Jason's got a new book coming out next week. Where's that? The third Alex Van Helsing, third and last Alex Van Helsing book, and we already got the hard copies, the things, the copies, the books, the physical books are in our hand. So yay!
Thank you. It's so kind of you to endorse that. I guess
I
don't have to. I wasn't scared of endorsing it myself, honestly. I was so.
Yes.
So I actually got a book that I really enjoy called Mexican Bestiary, which is put together by a group called Valley Outreach, I believe. It's the Valley Artistic Outreach, but they publish sort of nonfiction books that are all about Mexican culture. And this particular book is called Mexican Bestiary or Bestiario Mexicano, and it is in English and Spanish, and it is all about Mexican monsters, and it is awesome. I really love it. It's just full of like things that I'm going to rip off for whatever, especially if I do another thing in the Alex Van Helsing universe, I'm going to rip off some of this Mexican Bestiary.
That sounds awesome.
It is good. It's really good. Yeah. So with that, I think that wraps up our really one of the coolest conversations we've had. Aside from some technical difficulties when my mic went out, but we got to talk about art and our ideas about whether or not we should change our art, and I was excited to hear that. It makes me kind of like maybe want to spend some time just talking about a topic someday. But nevertheless, this has been a cool end up to the Hitchcock retrospective. So we'll be back next week with something pretty cool, and I'm very excited. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up soon. So tell your friends to listen to the Castle Dracula podcast, like us on iTunes and Facebook, and make comments and make suggestions, and we will be back very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.